The stars had always called to humanity. For thousands of years, people looked up at the night sky and wondered what was out there. They built telescopes. They sent rockets. They dreamed of the day when they would finally leave their small blue world and join the great community of the universe. That day came 40 years ago. When the first alien ship appeared above Earth, the whole world stopped. People stood in the streets and stared at the sky. Some cried. Some prayed. Some simply watched in silence as the massive vessel hung above their cities like a metal moon. The aliens called themselves the Galactic Concil. They were an assembly of 12 ancient species who had ruled the galaxy for longer than human civilization had existed. They had seen empires rise and fall. They had watched stars die and new ones be born. To them, humanity was nothing special, just another young species crawling out of the mud and reaching for the stars. But they offered membership. A provisional membership, they called it. Humanity would have limited rights. They could not vote on council matters. They could not own territory in the core systems, but they could trade. They could travel. And they could have one colony world. Earth's leaders accepted without hesitation. How could they refuse? The galaxy was open to them now. The dream of generations had finally come true. The Council gave humanity a world called Elysium Prime. It was a beautiful planet with 2 suns that painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. The land was fertile. The water was clean. It was perfect for human life. Within 20 years, 1 billion people lived there. They built cities that stretched toward the twin suns. They planted farms that covered entire continents. They raised children who had never known Earth, who called Elysium Prime their home. These children grew up watching alien ships pass through their skies. They learned alien languages in school. They believed they were citizens of the galaxy. They did not know how wrong they were. Ambassador Sarah Chen had served on the Galactic Council station for 15 years. She was old now, her hair gray and her face lined with the weight of her work, but her eyes were still sharp, and she saw things that others missed. She saw how the other species looked at humans, the way their eyes followed human delegates with something between amusement and disgust, the way they changed the subject when humans entered a room, the way they smiled politely while saying nothing at all. She had reported her concerns many times. They do not respect us, she wrote in her messages to Earth. They see us as children playing at being adults. We must be careful. But Earth did not listen. Humanity was too excited, too proud, too eager to believe they had finally found their place among the stars. They did not want to hear words of warning. They wanted to celebrate their success. High Arbiter Kolveth was the leader of the Galactic Council. He was a Thesson, a species that had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. His body was tall and thin, covered in scales that shifted color with his mood. He had 4 eyes that could see in every direction at once. He had served as High Arbiter for 300 years, and he would serve for 300 more. He did not hate humans. Hate required too much effort for such a small matter. He simply saw them for what they were, useful tools that had started to believe they were something more. Humans were good workers. They were creative and determined and willing to take risks that other species avoided. But they were also loud. They asked too many questions. They demanded too much. They spoke of equality and rights as if these things were owed to them simply because they existed. This could not continue. The Vethkai Dominion was one of the 12 council species. They were warriors, their society built on conquest and strength. For decades, they had wanted Elysium Prime. The planet sat in a strategic location, and its mountains contained rare minerals that powered their weapons. Lord Vethnar of the Dominion came to Kolveth with a proposal. "Give us Elysium Prime," he said. "Let us remove the human infestation. It will remind them of their place, and we will finally have the resources we need." Kolveth considered this for a long moment. His scales shifted from blue to a darker shade as he thought. The humans had been getting too confident lately. They had started asking for voting rights. They had started talking about additional colony worlds. They had even suggested that the provisional membership should become permanent. They needed to be reminded that they existed only because the Council allowed them to exist. "You may have Elysium Prime," Kolveth said finally. "But I have one condition." "Name it," Lord Vethnar replied. "Broadcast everything. Let every human, on every world, on every station, watch what happens. Let them see what becomes of those who forget their place." Lord Vethnar smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "It will be done." The council voted in secret session that night. The motion was simple. The Vethkai Dominion would be granted rights to Elysium Prime. The human colonists would be given no warning, no opportunity to flee, no chance to fight back. The vote was unanimous. Ambassador Chen learned of the decision 3 hours before the attack began. A young aide from the Rilthian delegation slipped her a data chip in the hallway. The Rilthians were a minor species, barely tolerated by the Council, and this one had always seemed sympathetic to humanity. "Run," he whispered. "Tell your people to run." Chen accessed the chip in her quarters. Her hands shook as she read the contents. The attack plan, the broadcast schedule, the Council's decree authorizing the complete destruction of Elysium Prime. She immediately tried to contact Earth, but the communication channels were blocked. She tried to reach Elysium Prime directly. The channels were blocked there too. The Council had planned this carefully. No warnings would get through. Chen ran to the shuttle bay. She had to get off this station. She had to reach someone, anyone, before it was too late. But Council security was waiting for her. "Ambassador Chen," the guard said politely. "The High Arbiter requests your presence in the viewing gallery. A historic event is about to occur, and he wishes humanity to have a representative present." They took her weapons. They took her communication devices. They led her to a great hall with massive windows that looked out into space. Other Council delegates were already there, drinks in hand, talking quietly among themselves. On the giant view screen at the center of the room, Elysium Prime turned slowly in the darkness of space. Its 2 suns cast warm light across its surface. Cities sparkled like diamonds scattered across the continents. 1 billion people were going about their lives. Parents were taking their children to school. Workers were heading to their jobs. Old couples were sitting on their porches, watching the twin suns rise. They had no idea what was coming. Chen pressed her hand against the window, staring at the beautiful world that was about to die. Tears ran down her face, but she made no sound. She would not give them the satisfaction. Kolvith approached her, his 4 eyes studying her with cold curiosity. "You should be honored, Ambassador. Your species is about to learn a valuable lesson, one that will shape your future for generations to come." "What lesson?" Chen whispered. Kolvith smiled. "That you are nothing, that you have always been nothing, and that you exist only because we allow it." On the view screen, the first Vethkai warships appeared above Elysium Prime. They were massive vessels, built for destruction, their weapons already charging. The broadcast began, and across the galaxy, humanity watched their world burn. The first explosion came at exactly 0600 hours, Elysium Standard Time. Maria Santos was making breakfast for her 3 children when the sky turned white. The windows of her small home shattered inward. She threw herself over her youngest daughter, feeling the glass cut into her back, hearing her children scream. When she looked up, half of New Geneva was gone. The Vethkai warships numbered in the hundreds. They filled the sky like angry metal clouds, blocking out the twin suns. Their weapons fired continuously, turning cities into craters, forests into ash, oceans into steam. The small human defense fleet scrambled to respond. 32 ships crewed by brave men and women who knew they were going to die. They launched from the orbital station, with no hesitation, no fear, only the desperate hope that they could buy time for the people below. Captain James Wright commanded the defense fleet. He was a veteran of the border patrols, a man who had spent his life preparing for a battle he hoped would never come. Now it was here, and his ships were hopelessly outmatched. "All ships, engage the enemy," he ordered. His voice was calm. "Make them pay for every inch." The battle lasted 11 minutes. The Vethkai destroyed the human fleet with casual efficiency. They did not even use their main weapons. Smaller guns were enough. The human ships exploded one by one, bright flowers of fire blooming in the darkness of space. Captain Wright's ship was the last to fall. In his final moments, he managed to ram his damaged vessel into a Vethkai cruiser, destroying both ships in a ball of flame. It was a small victory, but it was the only one humanity would have that day. On Earth, people watched in horror. The Council had broadcast the attack on every channel, every frequency, every screen. There was no escape from it. The images played in homes and offices, in schools and hospitals, in the streets where massive public screens had been installed years ago to celebrate humanity's achievements. Now those screens showed only death. President Elena Vasquez stood in the command center beneath the Alps, surrounded by her advisors and military leaders. The room was silent except for the sounds coming from the broadcast. Screams, explosions, the crackling of fires that consumed entire cities. "Can we send help?" she asked. Her voice was steady, but her hands were clenched so tight her nails drew blood from her palms. Admiral Thompson shook his head. "Elysium Prime is 6 weeks away at maximum speed. Even if we sent every ship we have, we would arrive too late. Contact the Council. Demand they stop this." "We have tried, Madam President. All channels are blocked. They are not accepting any communications from Earth." Vasquez turned back to the screen. A city was burning. People were running through the streets, their clothes on fire. A mother was carrying a dead child in her arms, screaming at the sky. "Then we watch," Vasquez said quietly. "We watch, and we remember." The massacre lasted 72 hours. The Vethkai were thorough. They did not simply bomb the cities from orbit. That would have been too quick, too merciful. Instead, they landed troops. They hunted down survivors. They made sure the cameras captured everything. A school in the city of Hope Harbor. 300 children hiding in the basement while their teachers tried to keep them calm. Vethkai soldiers found them and sealed the building. Then they set it on fire. The cameras showed everything. A hospital in the eastern continent. Doctors and nurses trying to save the wounded, while bombs fell around them. When the Vethkai arrived, they executed the medical staff first. Then they went room by room, killing everyone who could not run. The cameras showed everything. A refugee column on the northern highway. 50,000 people trying to reach the mountains, hoping they could hide in the caves until help arrived. Vethkai ships flew low over the highway, their weapons cutting through the crowd like scythes through wheat. The cameras showed everything. Throughout the massacre, Council commentators provided analysis. They spoke in calm, professional voices, as if they were discussing the weather or a sporting event. As you can see, the Vethkai forces are employing standard pacification protocols. This is a textbook operation. The human resistance has been minimal. This is typical of younger species who have not yet learned their place in the galactic order. Viewers should note that this action has been fully authorized by the Galactic Council. All appropriate legal procedures were followed. On Earth, something changed. It was not sudden. It was not loud. It was a quiet shift, a turning point that would only be understood later. But in those 72 hours, humanity transformed. Old enemies stopped fighting. Countries that had threatened each other for centuries suddenly found their differences meaningless. Political parties that had been locked in bitter conflict simply stopped arguing. There was only one thing that mattered now. In homes across the planet, people made silent promises. Parents held their children and swore that this would never happen again. Soldiers gripped their weapons and waited for orders that had not yet come. Scientists looked at their research and began to think of new applications. Darker applications. Things they had never considered before. The final transmission from Elysium Prime came from a young woman named Lin Wei. She was a teacher who had survived the initial bombing by hiding in the ruins of her school. She had found a working communication device in the rubble and managed to connect to the broadcast network. Her face appeared on screens across the galaxy. She was covered in dust and blood. One of her eyes was swollen shut. Behind her, fires burned against the darkening sky. "My name is Lin Wei," she said. Her voice was steady. "I am a teacher. I teach history to children. I taught them about Earth, about where we came from, about the dreams that brought us to the stars." She paused, coughing. Blood appeared on her lips. "I want you to know that we did not fight each other here. When the end came, we held hands. We sang songs. We told stories about home. We died together, as one people." Tears cut tracks through the ash on her face. "I want you to know that we forgive you," she said. "The Council, the Vethkai, all of you who watched and did nothing. We forgive you. That is what humans do. We forgive." She smiled then. A gentle, sad smile. "But I do not think Earth will forgive. I think Earth will remember. And I think one day, you will understand what it means to make humanity your enemy." The broadcast cut to static as a Vethkai soldier appeared behind her. No one saw what happened next. They did not need to. President Vasquez addressed the United Earth Assembly that night. The Great Hall was full, every seat taken. Representatives from every nation sat in silence, their faces hard as stone. "They want us to be afraid," Vasquez said. Her voice echoed through the chamber. "They want us to bow down. They want us to accept our place as slaves in their galaxy. She looked out at the assembly, at the flags of 100 nations, at the faces of people who had once been rivals but were now united by something stronger than any treaty. They have made a mistake. She placed her hands on the podium. From this moment forward, we are one people, one world, one purpose. We will build, we will prepare, and when the time comes, we will make them understand that humanity does not kneel. The assembly rose to its feet. There was no applause, no cheering, just silence and determination. In the stars above Earth, Elysium Prime was now a tomb. 1 billion people lay dead beneath the ashes of their dreams. But in the hearts of the survivors, something new had been born: fury. The galaxy expected humanity to break. After Elysium Prime, the Council waited for the begging to begin. They expected desperate messages pleading for mercy. They expected offers of complete surrender. They expected humans to finally understand their place in the universe. Instead, they got silence. For 18 months, Earth went dark. Trade ships stopped arriving at Council stations. Diplomatic channels went unanswered. Human merchants disappeared from the markets. Human workers left their positions on alien worlds and returned home without explanation. The Council dismissed this as grief. They are mourning, High Arbiter Kolveth said at a public assembly. Let them have their time. In a generation, they will return to us, properly humble, ready to serve. He was wrong. On Earth, the largest construction project in human history had begun. They called it Project Nemesis. Every resource, every mind, every ounce of human determination was focused on a single goal. Revenge was too small a word for what they wanted. Justice was too gentle. What humanity sought was something older and darker, something that had lived in their blood since the first humans learned to make tools and fire. They would make the galaxy fear them. General Marcus Stone stood in the control center of the Luna shipyard, watching through massive windows as thousands of workers swarmed over the skeleton of a new warship. Behind this ship, 100 more were being built. Behind those, 1,000 more. How long? President Vasquez asked. She had aged 10 years in the past 18 months. Her hair was completely gray now, and deep lines marked her face, but her eyes burned with the same fire that had kept humanity working through every day and night since the massacre. 14 months for the main fleet, Stone replied. The advanced weapons will take longer, but we will be ready. Will it be enough? Stone turned to face her. He was a tall man, scarred from a lifetime of military service. He had lost his daughter on Elysium Prime. She had been a teacher. Like Lin Wei, she had died in the bombing of Hope Harbor. It will be enough, he said. And if it is not, we will build more. We will keep building until nothing in the galaxy can stand against us. The weapons humanity created were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Council species had developed weapons over millions of years, but they had also developed rules. Certain technologies were forbidden. Certain methods of war were considered too terrible to use. These rules had existed so long that no one remembered why they had been created. Humanity had no such limitations. Dr. Yuki Tanaka led the Weapons Research Division. She was a physicist who had once dreamed of using science to help people. Now she dreamed of different things. The Council's shields are based on energy frequency patterns, she explained to the Military Council. They are effective against all known weapons because all known weapons use similar principles. But we have developed something new. She activated a holographic display showing a strange, twisted device. We call it a reality fracture torpedo. It does not attack the shield. It attacks the space around the shield. When it detonates, it creates a temporary hole in normal physics. The shield simply ceases to exist for 1.3 seconds. Admiral Thompson, now commander of the Unified Human Fleet, studied the display. 1.3 seconds. Is that enough? Tanaka smiled. It was not a kind expression. It is enough to get our other weapons through. And our other weapons are much more effective than torpedoes. The Council had spies. Of course, every great power had spies. But humanity had learned from the massacre. They knew that they could trust no one outside their own species. Security became absolute. Every communication was encrypted with codes that changed every hour. Every worker in the shipyards was screened constantly. Every piece of technology was developed in isolated facilities where no information could escape. The Council's spies sent back confused reports. They knew humanity was building something. They could see the factories running day and night, the resources being consumed, the massive structures taking shape in orbit. But they could not learn details. Their sources had dried up, their agents had disappeared. They are building a memorial, Kolveth decided when he received the reports. A monument to their dead. It is a typical response from young species. They will spend their resources on grief instead of survival. And in the end, they will be even weaker than before. Meanwhile, humanity mapped the galaxy. Millions of tiny probes, no larger than a human fist, spread through Council space. They were invisible to normal sensors, hidden in the radiation of stars and the dust between planets. They watched everything, every ship movement, every military installation, every council meeting. Colonel Sarah Chen, the former ambassador who had been forced to watch Elysium Prime die, now led the intelligence division. She had escaped the council station 6 months after the massacre, stealing a ship and fighting her way through 3 blockades to reach Earth. Now she sat in a dark room surrounded by screens, watching the enemy. "We know everything," she reported to the War Council. "Every patrol route, every supply line, every weakness. When we strike, they will not see us coming." "And the Vethkai?" General Stone asked. Chen's expression hardened. "Their homeworld is called Thessar. 3 billion inhabitants. Main military base in the northern continent. Ruling palace in the capital city of Vethnar Prime." She pulled up a detailed map of the planet. "I have identified every military target, every government building, every location where the leaders who ordered our people's deaths live and work. Civilian areas, marked and mapped. Our weapons will avoid them." Chen paused. "Unless the council decides otherwise." The room was silent. Everyone knew what she was really asking. The Vethkai had killed 1 billion humans without mercy. They had broadcast the deaths of children for entertainment. They had laughed while humanity burned. Would humanity do the same in return? President Vasquez stood slowly. She walked to the window and looked out at the earth below. The blue marble that had given birth to humanity. The home that still held billions of people who wanted nothing more than to live in peace. "We will not become what we are fighting," she said finally. "We will destroy their military. We will remove their government. We will make them pay for what they did. But we will not murder the innocent. We are better than that." She turned back to the room. "We have to be better than that. Because if we are not, then Elysium Prime died for nothing." The final preparation took place in secret, deep beneath the Sahara Desert, in a facility that officially did not exist. Human engineers completed work on the most powerful weapon ever created by their species. It was called the Prometheus Array, and it had the power to destroy an entire planet in a single shot. They hoped they would never need to use it, but they were prepared. On the anniversary of the Elysium Prime massacre, the memorial service was broadcast across Earth. 1 billion names were read aloud. 1 billion candles were lit. 1 billion moments of silence were observed. And when the service ended, humanity looked to the stars. They were ready. The silence was over. The fury was about to be unleashed. The Vethkai patrol ship Dominant Thunder was making its routine sweep through the outer territories when the universe seemed to tear open in front of it. One moment, space was empty. The next, a human fleet filled the darkness. Ships unlike anything the Vethkai had ever seen. Massive warships with weapons that glowed with strange energy. Carriers that launched fighters in swarms so thick they blocked out the stars. Captain Vethran barely had time to send a warning before the first shot struck his vessel. The shields that had protected Vethkai ships for 10,000 years flickered and died. The second shot tore through the hull like paper. The Dominant Thunder exploded in silence. The warning never reached home. Across Vethkai space, the same scene played out 100 times. Human ships appeared without warning from what the scientists would later call fold space technology, a method of travel that should have taken centuries to develop. Humanity had done it in 18 months. They had been very motivated. The first target was the Vethkai military installation at Fortress Kren. It was the largest military base in Vethkai territory, home to 500 warships and 1 million soldiers. It had been built into an asteroid the size of a small moon, protected by shields and weapons that could destroy an entire fleet. The battle lasted 4 hours. Admiral Thompson commanded the assault from his flagship, the UES Elysium. He had named it himself. Every human warship carried a name from the dead colony. New Geneva, Hope Harbor, Linway. 1 billion names were not enough. So they repeated them. Every ship was a memorial. Every weapon was a promise. "Fire the fracture torpedoes," Thompson ordered. The strange weapons launched in waves, their twisted shapes spiraling toward the fortress. When they struck the shields, reality seemed to bend. The protective barrier that had stood for 1,000 years simply vanished. Human weapons poured through the gap. The fortress crumbled. Sections exploded outward. Ships tried to flee and were cut down by human fighters. Soldiers tried to surrender and were taken prisoner. Humans were not monsters. They did not kill those who did not fight, but they showed no mercy to those who did. When Fortress Kren fell, humanity did something that shocked the galaxy. They broadcast it, on every channel, every frequency, every screen, in Council space. The destruction of the Vethkai military base was shown in perfect detail. Human commentators provided simple analysis, their voices calm and cold. This operation was conducted in response to the massacre of 1 billion human civilians on Elysium Prime. Military targets only. Civilian casualties, 0. A pause. We remember. The message was clear. Humanity had learned from its teachers, but they had learned a different lesson than the Council intended. Lord Vethnar, ruler of the Vethkai Dominion, watched the broadcast from his palace on Thessar. His scales had gone pale with shock. Around him, his advisors argued and shouted, their voices rising in fear and confusion. This is impossible, one advisor said. The humans were nothing. Primitives. They could not have developed this technology. Clearly they have. Another replied, we must contact the Council, demand their support. The Council? Vethnar finally spoke, his voice quiet but sharp. The Council authorized the attack on Elysium Prime. They will not help us. They will watch us burn and call it justice. He stood and walked to the window. Outside, his capital city spread to the horizon. Millions of his people lived there. Millions who had cheered when Elysium Prime died. What do we do, my lord? An advisor asked. Vethnar was silent for a long moment. Then he turned back to face them. We fight, and we pray that the humans are not as cruel as we were. The war spread across Vethkai space like fire through dry wood. Human fleets appeared and disappeared, striking without warning and vanishing before counterattacks could be organized. Supply lines were cut. Communication networks were infiltrated and destroyed. Military bases fell one after another. But the true weapon was not the ships or the bombs. It was the broadcasts. Every attack was shown to the galaxy. Every victory was announced. And with each broadcast, the same message, Elysium Prime, 1 billion. We remember. The common people of the galaxy watched in silence. For generations, they had been taught that the Council was all-powerful, that resistance was impossible, that the natural order could never be changed. Now they saw something different. They saw a young species, wounded and angry, standing against the ancient powers and winning. They saw that the giants could bleed, and some of them began to hope. The Rilthian delegation to the Galactic Council quietly approached human representatives. They offered intelligence. They offered access codes to Council communication networks. They asked only one thing in return. Remember that not all of us watched in silence, the Rilthian ambassador said. Some of us tried to warn you. Some of us mourned your dead as our own. Humanity remembered. The Methane Federation, a species that had been oppressed by the Council for centuries, sent secret messages of support. They could not fight openly, but they could sabotage Council supply lines. They could spread confusion and fear among the enemy. One by one, the cracks in the Council's power began to show. High Arbiter Kolveth assembled the full military might of the Galactic Council. 12 species, tens of thousands of warships, soldiers beyond counting. It was the largest military force ever gathered in galactic history. These humans have been lucky, he declared to the assembled commanders. They struck when we were not prepared. But now we are ready. We will crush them as we should have crushed them from the beginning. The Council fleet advanced toward human territory. Thousands of ships moving in perfect formation. Enough firepower to destroy 100 worlds. They never reached their destination. The human fleet was waiting for them in the empty space between stars. It was smaller than the Council force. Much smaller. The Council commanders laughed when they saw it. They are fools, the Vethkai admiral in command declared. They should have run. Instead they come to die. Admiral Thompson looked at the massive enemy fleet approaching his position. Behind him, his officers waited in tense silence. The odds were impossible. The enemy had them outnumbered 10 to 1. Thompson smiled. "Deploy the Shadow Fleet," he ordered. Space rippled, and from the darkness between stars, 1,000 hidden ships appeared. They had been waiting there for days, invisible, silent, patient. Now they attacked from every direction at once. The Council fleet, arranged in its perfect formation, suddenly found itself surrounded. Ships that had expected to fire forward now had to defend from all sides. Communication networks failed as human electronic warfare flooded their frequencies with noise. Chaos spread through the Council ranks. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it ended, the Council fleet was shattered. Thousands of ships drifted dead in space. Thousands more had fled, abandoning their allies in their panic to escape. The Council had been broken, but humanity was not finished. Admiral Thompson stood on the bridge of the Elysium as his fleet moved toward the heart of Council space. Behind him, the wreckage of the greatest military force the galaxy had ever known floated silently in the void. "Sir," his communications officer said, "we are receiving surrender signals from multiple Council species." Thompson nodded slowly. He thought about Elysium Prime, about the broadcasts of children burning, about Linway's final words. "Tell them to stand down all military forces and prepare for occupation," he said. "Tell them that justice is coming." He paused. "And tell them that we remember everything." The path to the Council homeworld was open. The storm was about to reach its final destination. The Council homeworld was called Nexus Prime. It was an ancient world, covered in cities that had stood for millions of years. The great Council chamber at its heart had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. It had never been conquered. It had never been threatened. Until now. Human ships filled the skies above Nexus Prime. They did not fire. They did not need to. The Council's fleet was destroyed. Its allies had surrendered or fled. The species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia stood alone and defenseless. High Arbiter Kolveth watched the human vessels from his private chambers. His scales had turned a sickly gray color, all trace of their usual proud shimmer gone. Around him, his advisors had abandoned their posts. Most had fled to ships that would take them far from this place. Some had simply disappeared. He remained. He would face what he had created. General Marcus Stone led the ground forces that landed on Nexus Prime. 10,000 human soldiers in black armor, moving through the ancient streets in perfect formation. The alien civilians watched from their windows, their strange faces showing fear and confusion. No human soldier fired a weapon. No human soldier harmed a civilian. They had their orders, and they followed them without exception. Stone himself climbed the great stairs of the Council chamber. His boots echoed on stone that had been walked upon by leaders of the galaxy for longer than humanity had existed. Behind him, his soldiers spread out through the building, securing every room and corridor. At the doors of the main chamber, Stone paused. He thought about his daughter, about her smile, about the last message she had sent him from Elysium Prime, 2 days before the attack. "I love my life here, Dad. I think I finally found where I belong." He pushed open the doors. Kolveth stood alone at the center of the great chamber. The seats around him were empty. The screens that had once shown the power of the Council were dark. He was the last one left. Stone walked slowly across the chamber floor, his footsteps the only sound. He stopped a few meters from the High Arbiter and removed his helmet. His face was hard, marked by the years of war and the weight of memory. "High Arbiter Kolveth," Stone said, "by order of the United Earth Government, you are under arrest for crimes against humanity." Kolveth's 4 eyes studied the human before him. He had expected rage. He had expected vengeance. He had expected to die in this chamber. But Stone's voice was calm. Cold, yes. Hard, certainly. But not wild with anger. Not burning with the need to destroy. "You surprise me," Kolveth said. "I expected you to kill me where I stand." "That is what you would have done," Stone replied. "That is what you did to 1 billion of our people. But we are not you. Then what will you do? Put me in a cage? Display me as a trophy? You will stand trial. You will answer for what you did, and then you will face justice." Stone's voice hardened. "Real justice. Not the kind you showed our people." The next weeks changed the galaxy forever. The Galactic Council was officially dissolved. Its members were arrested and held for trial. Evidence was gathered from their own records, their own broadcasts, their own proud documentation of the crimes they had committed. The trials were public. Every species in the galaxy could watch as the truth was revealed. The secret meetings, the votes to destroy Elysium Prime, the casual discussions about teaching humanity their place, and they could watch as the accused were given something they had never given their victims, a chance to defend themselves. Lawyers from every species offered to represent the council members. Witnesses were called. Evidence was examined. The process was slow and careful and fair. When the verdicts came, they were not surprising. High Arbiter Kolveth and 37 other council members were found guilty of crimes against humanity. They were sentenced to life imprisonment on a barren world at the edge of known space. They would live out their days in isolation, watched by guards who would never speak to them. They would not be executed. Death is too easy, President Vasquez explained at the press conference. They will have decades to think about what they did, to remember the faces of the children they killed, to understand, slowly, what kind of monsters they became. She paused. And the galaxy will remember that we could have destroyed them, but we chose not to. That is the difference between us and them. The Vethkai Dominion was dismantled. Their military was disbanded. Their leaders were tried and imprisoned. But their people were not harmed. Human administrators worked with local communities to establish new governments, new laws, new ways of living. It was not easy. Many Vethkai hated the humans who now controlled their world. Many humans hated the Vethkai who had killed their families. But slowly, carefully, new relationships began to form. In the ruins of the council chamber, representatives from 100 species gathered to sign the new compact. It was a different kind of agreement than the old council laws. It was based on simple principles. Every species has value. Every life matters. The strong do not have the right to destroy the weak, and justice will be enforced. By all. For all. Admiral Chen Wei, who had commanded the final assault on council space, was chosen to lead the new compact military force. It was a position of enormous power. He could have used it to make humanity the new masters of the galaxy. He did not. We did not fight this war to become what we destroyed, he said in his first address. We fought to create something better, and we will spend the rest of our lives building that something, even if it takes generations. On Earth, the memorial was finally completed. It covered the entire site of the old United Nations building in New York. 1 billion names were carved into walls of black stone that stretched toward the sky. At the center stood a statue of Lin Wei, the teacher who had broadcast humanity's final message from Elysium Prime. Her words were carved at the base of the statue. We forgive you. That is what humans do. We forgive. Below that, a second inscription had been added. But we also remember. And we will never let this happen again. President Vasquez, now old and tired, attended the memorial's dedication ceremony. She walked slowly among the names, touching the stone, whispering words that no one else could hear. Near the end of her walk, she stopped at one particular name, Maria Santos, the mother who had thrown herself over her children when the bombs fell. She had died saving her youngest daughter, who had somehow survived and been rescued by human forces after the war. That daughter was now a young woman. She stood nearby, watching the old president with eyes that held both sorrow and hope. Thank you, the young woman said quietly. Vasquez looked at her for a long moment. Then she reached out and took the young woman's hand. Build something beautiful, Vasquez said. Make their sacrifice mean something. That is how we honor the dead. In the skies above Earth, ships from 100 species passed peacefully. Trade had resumed. Diplomacy had begun. The galaxy was learning to live in a new way, guided by the principles that humanity had written in fire and blood. It would not be easy. There would be challenges and setbacks and moments when the old hatreds threatened to return. But humanity had shown the galaxy something it had never seen before. They had shown that power does not have to mean cruelty, that justice does not have to mean revenge, that it is possible to win a war and still keep your soul. High Arbiter Kolveth, in his prison cell on a distant world, watched the broadcasts from the new compact. He saw humans and aliens working together. He saw children of different species playing in the same parks. He saw the beginning of something that the old council had never imagined possible. And in the silence of his cell, the ancient alien finally understood the lesson that humanity had taught the galaxy. The universe does not belong to the strongest. It belongs to those who are willing to build something worth believing in. And humanity, forged in the fire of unimaginable tragedy, had become the builders of a new age. They had been told they were nothing. They had proven they were everything. and the galaxy would never forget.